Hello everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar today. My name is Vlad Katkov. I'm a Solution Architect with Dundas BI, and I'll be leading this session today where we're discussing delivering secure self-service analytics to all users. So the agenda for this webinar today, first we'll be giving an introduction to governed data discovery. So we'll talk a little bit about what it is, how it came about, and why it's necessary in today's BI world. Then a short introduction to Dundas BI. We're going to follow that up with more detailed look at governed data discovery in Dundas BI. And here there'll actually be a demo portion. We're going to touch upon some topics such as self-serve data discovery and how IT acts as an enabler for the users. And lastly, we'll finish this off with a Q&A session. Okay, so let's begin. So first we'll talk about two BI camps, and you'll see at the bottom of the screen is a reference to a report made by the Eckerson Group. So a lot of the information in this presentation does come from these reports, which will be made available as well after this presentation. So there are two BI camps that are really prevalent in today's BI tools. We have the top-down approach, which is the more traditional one. It was actually introduced to combat what was called the spreadsheet chaos of the 1990s, where everyone had their own, had multiple spreadsheets and a different style of doing things. And then top-down was meant to unify the reports and basically deliver a single version of the data in order to align business practices. And then the name itself, top-down, refers to how reports and requirements were handed down from IT to the end users. So then was introduced bottom-up, which is a much more recent BI camp, basically. And basically, it flips the idea of top-down by allowing data discovery to happen in a very much an ad hoc fashion. So with bottom-up, end users will actually ask and answer their own questions. So here we have some differentiating factors between top-down and bottom-up. The two largest ones, I think, are at the very top. Top-down is driven by IT, whereas bottom-up is driven by the business unit. When something is driven by IT, your end users might not have as much power. And this actually works quite well for casual users. You don't give them too much flexibility so they don't get lost in the product. On the other hand, bottom-up BI, because it's the business unit asking these questions and making these decisions, it's geared more towards power users that are familiar with the data and are a bit more technical. But it's clear that these two methods each have unique strengths, and they're quite opposite to one another. But it's been found that a middle ground is actually the best solution in order to get the most out of each BI approach. So now let's discuss about how data discovery came about and even why such a thing is necessary. So with top-down, there is an obvious downside, and it's the fact that it's the corporate BI team that needs to create these reports for the users. And the BI teams will have a huge backlog for data requests. So there'll be a lot of users that want data. Obviously, not everyone can have this data access at the same time. So basically, it just takes a long amount of time to get the data that the business unit and those users want. So now comes in data discovery in order to save the day. And it looks as though things are working with data discovery because we have now given those business analysts the power to explore and look at data on their own. But soon enough, you end up with the reverse problem of top-down. And this time, it's a complaint that comes from the executive level suite. So what happens is when all the users have access to data and they're creating their own reports, you get a lot of basically different data silos or different data warehouses, and the data doesn't roll up nicely together. So it might not match. Every user has a different style of doing things. And at the end of the day, these reports are created for the executive team because the executives are the ones that need to make those business decisions based on the report. So it was finally found that the executives couldn't make those decisions very well because the reports kind of made no sense. So this is where data discovery has its role. So on this slide, we can see the benefits and drawbacks to the two methods. Right? So for top-down, it has clear benefits: data consistency, standardized metrics, and also business alignment. Right? Because the requirements for these reports are handed down from executives to IT to the end user. So it very well aligns with what the business needs. However, there are some very good benefits to bottom-up as well. It is fast to deploy, it's easy to change, and it's inexpensive. In short, it's more flexible, and a lot more can be done with this. So at the end of the day, top-down and bottom-up are just different means to the same end. And in an organization where the end goal is to make data more accessible, it becomes more and more apparent that a blend of these two approaches is necessary. So this is where governed data discovery comes in. When IT has too much control, as we can see on the left side, that results in stagnation, repression, and oppression. The users can't come up with new metrics and they can't really make new decisions. They're always answering the same older questions over and over. On the other hand, when users are given too much freedom, as we discussed, that results in chaos, conflict, and disorder. So with governed data discovery, what it's really trying to solve is trying to get business users the speed they need to access their data. It also gives IT consistency and ability to control and time to work on enterprise level needs. And ultimately, the end goal of all this is to give the organization those high quality reports that it needs in order to make better decisions. So now let's talk a little bit more about specifically governed data discovery. Before data can be put to use as a visual or a report, the proper data must be identified and made available to the users that need to see it. And generally, an organization will have several levels of users that are required in this process. And the idea behind governed data discovery is to streamline all the work involved in order to make it as easy as possible for all the users. So with governed data discovery, if we look at the first point, business users have the ability to explore data on their own. And the point just underneath, some knowledge about the data is beneficial but may not be required. This is fairly important. Of course, if you have knowledge about your data and you know sort of what needs to be done with it, it will be easier for you to create reports and visualizations. But if perhaps you're not familiar with the data, it is still possible to make use of it as long as it is properly named and there are proper descriptions added to it. It might take a little bit longer, but it shouldn't be impossible for a user who doesn't have the most, let's say, intimate knowledge of the data to still be able to create reports. And then the last bullet point for the business users, no need to wait on IT. This is also kind of answers one of the big complaints with top-down, is invoking IT can sometimes be a timely process, especially if there's a lot of red tape, such as forms or requests to fill out. And sometimes, IT can simply be busy and turnaround time is slow. There's also a high chance of communication breakdown between the end user's requirements and how IT interprets it. So by giving users the ability to explore data on their own, you are removing that potential link of failure. So now if we look at how governed data discovery affects IT, IT needs to give these business users the ability to explore the data, but they also need to do this within the proper boundaries, right? And limiting the available data can actually be helpful. For example, if you give a user access to an entire database, they might look at it and they don't really know what's going on. They'll feel overwhelmed and they might just want to abandon the project. So actually, by limiting data in some cases, you make it easier for the end users to figure out what's going on. And lastly, why this also works very well for IT is the ability to control the types of analyses and then create predefined metrics. So a company will more likely than not have standards for reporting regarding the look and feel and the data quality. So you'll be able to define these boundaries and the limits to give users just the right amount of freedom to create these reports that still work for the organization. So now let's talk a little bit about how modern BI tools help really enable governed data discovery. So modern enterprise BI tools are much better positioned for this task of governed data discovery than even tools just several years old. So a lot of modern tools will have things such as parallel processing, in-memory storage, and open APIs. And what this basically means in the end is better integration and faster performance that's required for exploration. Simply put, if a tool takes too long to load or to work, users will abandon it. So here we have a table with different features. And once again, if you look at the bottom, this is coming from a different report from Eckerson, the 10 characteristics of a modern enterprise BI tool. I won't really spend too much time on this. Once again, these slides will be made available. But just to go over some of the key points, a big feature is browser-based. So browsers have now become very capable platforms, in part thanks to HTML5 and other JavaScript frameworks, and it lets users access data from wherever they go. IT also doesn't need to worry about individual applications that they need to deploy on, let's say, different operating systems and different mobile devices. Everything is easy to access and maintain. Also, the ability to add multi-tenancy. This is very big for security and controlling data access. And built-in governed discovery features. This one applies very much to our webinar today. Things like private sandboxes, which are folders where users can create their own reports without others having access, and then the ability to promote sort of completed, nice polished off reports to a shared folder to share with other users. Now moving on, another big thing is a complete BI platform. So it's no longer just a one-dimensional tool. It's no longer something just for reporting or just for warehousing some data or just for analytics. When everything is rolled up into one platform, into one architecture, it makes it easier to use and access. There's also extensive connectivity. So this is the ability to connect to and also query wide sets of data sources. Search-driven, where users can simply search for reports and objects rather than navigating through tree structures to find them. And self-service authoring, this one also applies very much to our webinar, where you can allow business users the freedom to create their own content and reports without IT intervention. Lastly, we have these two features, collaboration, things like the ability to add notes to dashboards, share and publish content. This is very great because basically anyone in an organization can get in the game and participate in the dashboard and data discussion. And the last one, embeddability. This is the ability to integrate your BI tool into existing portal or client application. So I actually found a quote in this Eckerson report, which I found very interesting. It reads, "For BI tools to become pervasive, they must disappear." I really like this quote. I think it almost speaks to sort of human nature, where people, if they're told they have to learn a new tool, they'll be wary of it, and they might not want to do so, even if this tool has the ability to help them. So a great way to remove this hurdle, basically, is to hide your BI tools in plain sight. And one way of doing that is integrating or embedding the BI application into your own existing portal, doing things like removing the vendor's logos and adding your own, and almost convincing the user that they're still using the same application. This can also help quite a bit. So now let's move in to a short introduction to Dundas BI. So kind of touching upon those points we just mentioned, Dundas BI is a modern end-to-end BI platform. So fully web-based on HTML5, that means compatibility with all the major browsers, different operating systems, and also devices, which is an interesting point. It doesn't matter if you're on a desktop, a tablet, or a smartphone. as long as that device can connect to the network that Dundas BI is on, you'll be able to view, consume, even create reports and dashboards. Another point to note is that it can be deployed on-premise, which a lot of clients do for security reasons, but it's also possible to have a cloud deployment with Dundas BI. Now, sort of the idea behind Dundas BI is that IT enables the users, and analysts, business analysts, can use built-in analytics to get to the data and really come up with some unique visualizations and make the data more powerful than when it's simply sitting in a database. And lastly, Dundas BI is self-serviceable, collaborative, and very embeddable. So these are the 4 layers to Dundas BI. On the left, we have the connectors layer where you can connect to your data sources. After that is the data layer where developers can go in and create data cubes and mix and blend different data sources together. Then we move on to this business layer where it's more for a power user or a business analyst where they can use this existing data to create things like metric sets and hierarchies. And lastly, we have views such as dashboards, reports, and scorecards. And views can use a combination of any of the previous 3. So on a view, you can place an existing metric set or put some data from a data cube or raw data from a database. Now, that's all the time I'll really spend on Dundas BI. Once again, this webinar is about governed data discovery. If you are interested in more information, we do have other webinars. You can always visit our website as well. So now I'll get into the target users of Dundas BI. So these are sort of real-world users that Dundas BI differentiates. And you can see on the left, they range from consumers to those who create data, and lastly, users who control the data. So we start off at the top with non-technical users. These would be these would be viewers who just open up dashboards, consume the data. They're still able to do things like filter in order to create their own unique views. We then move on to non-technical business users who, once again, will mainly be consuming content. That's because they either do not have the time or skill to create their own content, or quite simply, they don't have the need to create content. A non-technical business user could be someone who's fairly high up in the company, could be an executive who has a team creating the metrics for them. So for that reason, they don't need to do any of the creation process themselves. Then we move down to the business and data analyst users. So these would be consultants or power users. And these are the types of users that actually create content. They'll be able to connect to data and basically put it to use. And they like to customize their work, so they'll have a bit more power in Dundas BI. And lastly, we move on to the very technical users. So this can be someone from the IT team or a developer or an OEM partner or someone like that. So these are users who might use dashboards and they might use the UI, but really they're there to integrate the solution and also extend it. This is where their technical skills come in. And also administrators will be there to deploy, maintain, and administer the solution. So now all these users we just talked about, they actually map to different types of users in Dundas BI. So in Dundas BI, these would be considered different license types. Let's begin once again at the top where we have a standard user, and this is someone who will be consuming data. Now generally they will log into Dundas BI, they'll be taken to a dashboard that they need to see, and they can view that dashboard, but also they have some ability to create their own views and slideshows, and for this they can use existing metric sets that the power users will create for them. So moving on to the power user, this is a business analyst, someone who can, as I mentioned, create the data connectors, whether it's to a database or even Excel, and then they create hierarchies and metric sets and let these standard users view them. Then we move on to the developer, and the developer can do everything that a power user can do with the addition of the ability to create data cubes and cube perspectives. So here they can take the data, perform more advanced analytics on it. Another thing they can do is create advanced interactions by adding scripts onto the dashboard. Now the last item on this page is the administrator. The administrator technically is not a user type, it is actually a role. And any one of these three types of users can be assigned the administrator role. So as the name implies, this user will be managing things like user accounts, groups, sessions, and projects. They can view logs. They can change a lot of configuration settings in Dundas BI, things concerning licensing, multi-tenancy, import, and export. Once again, any three of these users can be an administrator. Usually, it would be a developer, someone who would be familiar with the product and has those technical skills. So now, moving on to the slide, which is governed data discovery in Dundas BI. So before I get into this, I just want to say I won't spend too much time talking about this because right after the slide, we're going to jump into the product demo and you'll see most of this in action. But just a few things that I do want to point out, how Dundas BI sort of approaches governed data discovery. So there is a top-down approach where you have the ability to connect to your data sources and you can create these optional data models. You can then control data security and give access to these models, to the data models, to whoever needs to see it. Now from the other side, the bottom-up approach is all users, every single user in Dundas BI has the ability to create their own dashboard in their own sandbox, in their own private project. So any user can come in and use data exploration. The other point to mention, data blending and hierarchy detections can happen on the fly, so that's also an important point. So now, with the presentation out of the way, let's jump into the demo. So once again, for questions, please kind of keep those in mind and we can get to them after the demo. Okay, so this is Dundas BI. This is our kind of login screen. And how we're going to do this demo today is I will first log in as a standard user and we'll see what they're capable of doing. And then we'll move on to a power user and finally an administrator. So as I mentioned before, anybody can be a standard user. It doesn't have to be, it can be someone even high up in the company. And in this case, for this example, I'm actually going to be logging in for my fictitious company as the vice president for sales. And let's see what happens when I log in. So here I've logged in as my standard user, the VP of sales, and instantly I'm taken to a dashboard. Now this is an important note. As the VP of sales, this is the data that I want to see. I'm not really interested in seeing how the rest, maybe I'm not interested in seeing how the rest of the application works. I just want to be able to get to my dashboards and get access to my data very quickly. So a dashboard like this is a pretty nice looking dashboard. This would be considered like a professional dashboard created by the IT team for a specific set of users. So here, as the VP of sales, I have access to some key performance indicators or KPIs and metric sets that interest me. For example, acquisition cost might be very important for me to see. Things such as average revenue per user might also be important. Right, so I'm not, once again, I won't spend a lot of time going through all the visualizations and what everything on this dashboard means. Just the takeaway is that as a standard user, I log in and instantly I'm taken to my data. So for the VP of sales, in their case, if they have a meeting coming up, they can open up this dashboard and for instance, I can see that in Q4, the acquisition cost for 1-year contracts were up quite very high. So that's something I can perhaps address in an upcoming meeting and using this dashboard. So Now let's kind of take a look at, this is a top-down approach where this dashboard was created by IT and I was given access to it. Let's see what it looks like for the standard user from the bottom-up approach. So I can actually navigate to the home screen. And then this is, as a standard user, all I see. There's really not that much here that that can overwhelm or perhaps even confuse this user. So one thing I can do right off the bat is explore data. And let me click that. And this will actually take us to our dashboard designer in Dundas BI. So from here, I can start creating my dashboard. Now the question is, how can I do this? What data do I have access to? So if we take a look on the right, some things to point out. First of all, I'm in this My Project project. And we talked about users having private sandboxes. This is such an example. So once again, just to reiterate, my project is private to this user. So I can go in here as the VP of Sales, basically play around with data, create a dashboard that I want to see. And how I can create this dashboard is by using predefined metric sets that someone else, like a business analyst, would have created. And if you take a quick look, I've just opened up this shared folder. So Dundas BI has this global project that all users have access to. So these are the two main differences: the private one, My Project, and then the global one, which shows up as shared. So in here, you can see I have a few different metric sets. And perhaps as the VP of Sales, I actually asked one of my analysts to come up with these metric sets because I'm interested in viewing them. And I was given great descriptions right away in their names, but if I place my mouse over, a little tooltip pops up that actually says this table has historical product price and cost by year. So once again, I asked my business analyst to come up with these, and here are the metric sets that I want to see. Now, just before I place them onto my dashboard, I'm going to use a template. And templates are here to create consistent look and feel across the dashboard. So perhaps as the VP of Sales, I like this template, which gives me a title and the ability to add 4 charts onto it. So let's go ahead. I'm going to drag this table right onto my dashboard. And here you can see this is what it looks like. So as the VP of Sales, as the standard user, to me, it doesn't really matter where this data is coming from, whether it's SQL or Oracle or some data in the cloud. That doesn't really make too much of a difference. I also am not really concerned the sort of work went into this, if there was data analytics or things like that. Perhaps this was difficult to come up with this data, but all I need to see is this finished visualization. And so even though right now it's a table, I still have the ability to re-visualize it to something a little bit more interesting, something that fits my needs. And if I hit re-visualize from this menu bar over here, there's quite a lot of visualizations to choose from in Dundas BI. And I'm going to go with a line chart, which is very good for displaying trending or historical data. So here's this one visualization. I'm just going to keep dragging out a few others, such as sales order history, and then a top 10 product map, and also a breakdown of the products in a pie chart. So this, as the VP of Sales, is what I want to see. Last thing I need to do is add a title, and I can just say, let's say, product history, something like that. And this is my simple yet completed dashboard, which I threw together using existing data visualizations. So now I can actually go ahead and view it. And this is what my data looks like. And I can play around with this. So for instance, if I'm interested in one particular year, I do have the ability to right-click and drill down. As long as the data is there to support that functionality, all this is available. So now with this dashboard, as you remember, it's currently in the user's private project. Let's say this user, the VP of Sales, wants to make it available to someone else. Well, that's easy to do. From our toolbar, there is a share option, and you can send the dashboard over as a link. So if here I have a list of my users, and I can just kind of go ahead and select who should get access to this dashboard. I also am given a link here, which I can send out to users. And lastly, if I want, I can change the type of view that those users will see. So a simple viewer would be only this dashboard, or I can choose to add a full editor or show the menu bar and so forth. So for the standard user, that's that. If I can just recap, we went from the top-down approach, which was landing at a dashboard upon logging in, to creating my own sort of data exploration. Now let's actually log out and log back in as perhaps the sales analyst that was asked to do that work for the VP of sales. So you can see when I log in as the sales analyst, I see this home screen, but it's a little bit more colorful than the previous one because there are a few more options available to me. So aside from these blue boxes that were available previously, as this bit power user, I can connect to data. I can also create metric sets. So let's actually do that. Let's recreate one of the metric sets that the VP of sales used on their dashboard. So I'm going to click on that. And this is our metric set designer. So how I can go about creating a metric set. On the right side, you'll see I have my different objects. And once again, it is considerably more than the standard user saw. So the power user has access to raw data connectors and also data cubes. So what this means is if I expand this, and once again, I'm using data connectors that were made globally available by IT, I can see the different databases that I have access to. And once again, the data comes from different sources such as SQL data, there's OLAP, Excel files, OData, it doesn't really matter as long as this data is here. Now to give an idea of how IT, in terms of the top-down approach, can limit data, just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to expand this one table I have here called called AdventureWorks. And I can see there are approximately seven tables here that I have access to. Now this database, AdventureWorks, is actually quite large. And just down here, I actually have access to the full database. And if I expand this, you'll see there's quite a lot going on here. So something that IT does in this top-down approach is they can create this data connector and limit how many tables and how many resources are available. So as this power user, perhaps if I look at this and I see there are almost 100 different tables, I will get overwhelmed. So this is not for me. But something much easier to use like this makes a lot more sense. Now the power user also has access to data cubes. And data cubes, which can be created by developers, take this idea of a table and you can even narrow it down further. So here I have a data cube, product sales order history. And if I expand that, I'll see there's only a few measures and dimensions available to me. So as this power user, I don't even need to worry about the raw data. I don't need to worry if it's coming from SQL or Oracle or OLAP or Excel. All I can do now is actually look at this data cube, and it makes my life even easier. So let's go ahead and recreate one of those visualizations that we saw. And I can do so just by dragging and dropping measures onto this metric set designer. I'm also going to add to this the year component of the date. And so here is my little table that I've come up with. And if perhaps you recall, this actually was displayed as a bar chart. So let's go ahead and revisualize that to a bar. Here's my data. Now you'll notice that line total shows up just fine, but next to each one is the order quantity. It doesn't show up very well because it's order of magnitudes less. So how we can fix this is in the properties. Dundas BI has a lot of customizable properties. In this case, I'm just going to go into this series and specify that I want to display it on a new axis on the right. So here I have my order quantity. On the left, I have my dollar amount. And since this is a dollar amount, let's actually make that a little more noticeable. I'm just going to add a dollar sign to display before that amount. So here we can see these are actually dollar amounts. So this is that visualization. And I'm going to do one more thing kind of to make this a little bit more interesting. I'm going to add to it a formula. And you'll see here I have this little formula bar appears. If I'm going to very quickly click on help, it just takes you to our support website where you can see a list of all the formulas we support. So there are standard ones, statistical functions, subset, and a lot of financial functions to choose from. So the formula I'm going to create is very simple, where I just take my dollar amount and I divide it by how many orders were placed. I'm going to specify to show this as a line and apply this to my chart. Now once again, it is being displayed, but the number is very low. So I'm going to head back and decide to place this on a new axis. And now we can see this line appearing. Now since this line, it's a dollar per order, it's just giving me basically a ratio. I don't really need to see that axis, so I'm just going to hide it. And so this is what I'm left with, this visualization. So all that I need to do now is give this a descriptive name. So for instance, product sales with formula. And now in order to reuse this visualization on some dashboards, I'm just going to check it in. And here I can add a comment. Checking it in is for revision history, and I have successfully checked this in. So what I can do now is navigate back to the home page, and I'm going to now explore data. So by clicking this, I return to the dashboard designer, and if I expand this metric set folder, here shows up that metric set that I just created. So I can simply drag it out onto my dashboard and kind of resize it however I want. Now a power user also has the ability to explore Excel data, and they can do this quite easily simply by dragging an existing Excel file such as this right onto the dashboard. And you'll notice that Dundas BI is already sort of parsing the data here and figuring out this data. And I can go ahead and now modify this and revisualize it however I want. So for example, perhaps I'm not interested in the city. Maybe I only want the different continents. Well, let's leave this, and if we revisualize that to a line, we're kind of left with this visualization. Once again, I can play around with this and change this however I want, but kind of for the purposes of this demo, let's leave this as is. So I have these two different charts. Now I can actually go ahead, for example, I can add a filter, and if I grab this calendar range filter, I can associate it with the date on one of my charts. So here's that. I can do a few more things to kind of spruce up this dashboard. So for instance, I can drag in a company logo over here. And I can also add a small component such as a line just to give it kind of a different look. Drag that across. And so here is, once again, my very simple dashboard with some data analysis that I've created from a data cube and from an Excel file. And so what I can do now is this metric set already exists in this metric set folder. Now let's say this one I created on the fly, but I also want to save it. What I can do is I can actually promote this. If I navigate into my dashboard and I open up this folder called auto-generated items, I have the ability here to simply promote. Let's give it a name such as sales by region. And if I open this up here, I see sales by region. It now exists, and if I ever create a new dashboard, I can go ahead and simply drag this onto the dashboard. So what's left for the power user? There's basically one more step, and it's once the dashboard is complete, so might require a little bit more work than this, but for the purposes of this demo, let's say this is a finished dashboard. I want to, as a power user, get this out to some other users and make it visible. So what I can do is actually, well, first I'm going to give this dashboard a name. Let's call it Product Sales Exploration. So now here I've changed the name. Here is my dashboard. I can actually just right-click on this and choose to publish it. And publishing essentially makes a copy of this dashboard in a different project. So for this visualization, I went ahead and I created this project called Governed Data Discovery. And this can be a project that several users have access to. For example, it could be the executive suite. And perhaps this sales analyst or this business analyst was given permissions by an administrator to push data out to this project. So I can do that. I'm just going to select a few options here. There we go. And now this dashboard is actually available in this other project. So the users that have access to the project, and once again, that can be determined by the administrator, they can open up that project and view a copy of this. So to reiterate, as the power user, what we did was we logged into the application. We first created a metric set. We recreated the one that we saw earlier, this time with a formula. We then created a dashboard, and all of this was done in our private sandbox. And once this dashboard was created, and once it was deemed acceptable to be sort of pushed out, we published it to a shared project. So once again, I do want to say publishing is not something that's enabled by default. It would have to be allowed by an administrator. In this case, this power user, the trust level is there, and they were given that ability. So on that note, let's actually log out. And the last thing we're going to do now is log in as an administrator to see what sort of capabilities the administrator has. So a few new things to point out here. Well, first of all, this administrator is also a developer. So as a developer, I have access to data cubes. I can create a cube and a cube perspective. As an administrator, I have access to the administration section. So let's show you some features of the developer. So once again, I've just sort of created a dashboard here. I won't actually be creating a dashboard. Instead, I'll be showing some features in this Explore panel. So one ability that the developer has is the ability to specify tags on certain objects. So you'll see here there's actually a search function built into Dundas BI. So if I am, maybe I don't know where everything is located, but if I know what data I want to find, I'll simply be able to search for it. And as long as that data is properly tagged or there are proper descriptions, I'll be able to find it. So for instance, here is that data cube. And the data cube is something the developer would have to create. Now I can go ahead and from this properties panel, specify some tags that I want to add to this data cube. Now, I'm just going to type in webinar because I know this is a tag that does not exist anywhere else in my project. So here we've added this webinar tag. I'm going to accept this change. And now from the search bar, if I type in webinar, I see this is kind of the only object in my entire solution that has this tag associated with it. So once again, searching was one of the 10 characteristics reported by Eckerson of modern BI tool, and this is how something like that can be done in Dundas BI. Now, the next thing I'll move on to are permissions. So we already actually kind of saw how permissions work when our standard user chose to share the dashboard. When we clicked on a link, you're able to give permissions to certain users. This can work in another way. So if I kind of select any of the dashboards I have here, I can navigate to the properties. And if I scroll down, I have a security panel. Once again, I'm a developer and administrator, so as a result, I can see this field. And here I can specify other users that I want to add in order to give them access to my dashboard. So it doesn't necessarily have to happen at the dashboard level. I can click on the project and give other users access to this project. So this is a really simple way, and it shows you how you can set up those permissions on that shared project. So the very last thing we're going to show before we end up going to the questions is another ability to filter data. And this is actually something we call custom attributes. And this happens in the administration portion of the application. So this is what the administrator sees when they log in to the admin section. I have a drop down here for custom attributes. Now what custom attributes do is they let me filter data at the row level. So if I have a table and there's data in it, which let's say there's a specific column such as a country or perhaps a store location, and depending on who logs in, I feel as though those people should only see data for their country or for their store. So in that case, this is where custom attributes get used. So if I navigate to here, you'll see there are a few custom attributes that I've already created. Here's one, which is country. And the idea behind it is you specify the user's country in this attribute. So specifying attributes happens at the account level. Here I have a list of all my users. I can choose any particular user, doesn't really matter who. And from here, I can specify the custom attributes I want. So for example, I'm going to say this user should have a country attribute where the value can be Canada. And I can apply that change. So now this user has this custom attribute. So I'll demonstrate this with a pre-built example. So this is a dashboard that we have built out, which demonstrates this row and role level security. So you'll notice right here, this is a single dashboard. Now, based on the user I log in as, my data here changes to reflect that user. So once again, this is using that custom attribute based on who I log in as. The data here is getting filtered. And so that's it for custom attributes. And as a matter of fact, that's it for the demo today for governed self-service and data exploration. So now if I just jump back to our slides here, it is Q&A time. So now I'll be monitoring the questions poll. I see there are a few that have been asked, and we'll try to respond to a few of them. So if your question, I'm sort of looking through them right now to try and figure out a good one to ask. If something is not answered, then we will make note and get back to you. So there's one question asked by Ajesh in terms of tracking changes to a dashboard, version control. So that you may have seen, if I navigate back to my Dundas BI instance, and let's say I explore my data. So by checking something in, you create a version history of it. And if I expand some of my dashboards, I can head over to the properties, and here I can see revision history. So in this case, here there have been no check-ins. -1 means that this dashboard is actually checked out. If I, that's called open self-service, if I check this in, I'm just going to say it's a test check-in. And now if I head over to the properties and view the revision history, this number has changed to 0. I also have the ability, let's say I check it in another time, I'll be able to roll back to a previous version. Okay, so another question that has been asked in terms of report. So I have been sort of mentioning the word report quite a bit. I would say dashboard and report. So Dundas BI does have the concept of dashboards and reports. And as you can see, dashboards are, if I actually, I'm going to log back in as the VP of Sales. Whoops. Sorry, I was at the wrong instance. Here we go. So this is a dashboard, right? A dashboard is basically a summary of your data. It works very well with visualizations when they are kind of summarized and rolled up. So for instance, all this data for Q4 and all these different quarters, it's all aggregated. Now we also have this concept of reports, and you're correct in saying that the report is a more tabular format for displaying your data. It's a little bit different. It still accepts visualizations, but generally a report would be a breakdown of your data. And we have some samples of that on our website, and I'll reply to that question as well with some samples. Okay, so there is a question from Gary regarding alerts. And the question asks, alerts sent as email or test if a certain event or result happens. So the answer is yes, we do have alerts. In your case, you're looking at the data-driven alert. So what this does is this actually will hook up to certain data on a dashboard, and you can use this to monitor a certain field. So for example, and as you can see right now, I'm logged in as the VP of Sales. I do have access to this data-driven alert. So I can create one, and I can say that I want to monitor this subscriber acquisition cost value. And let's say this value hits $20, which is a fairly high subscriber acquisition cost. I want to receive a notification of that. So in that case, yes, you use a data-driven alert, you hook it up to this value, and you say whenever this value hits a threshold, which is up to you, you can definitely configure that, I want to receive an email, and in that email, you can include an export of the dashboard, and here are the different formats that we support. So there's image, PDF, Excel, PowerPoint, also CSV. So that's how you can use the data-driven alert. Also, you don't have to wait for it to hit a certain value. This is quite a powerful tool. You can just have it monitor data, and let's say that if I monitor this data and I say if this value increases continuously for a week in a row, I want to receive a notification as well. So something like that is possible to set up with the data-driven alerts. So then I believe this would be the last question before we end the webinar. This one is from Julianne, who asks about custom attributes. The question was, how do you apply them to the dashboard? So that's a great question. Once you create a custom attribute, you'd actually apply it in a data cube, which is our ETL layer. So if I log back in as an administrator, and once again, I didn't demo this portion because it wasn't sort of the focus of this presentation, but if I open up a data cube that I have created, and this one is fairly advanced, I'm doing several joins between different data sources. In here, in the data cube, is where you will filter that data. So we have a filter transform, and you can basically place this into a data cube and say, hook this up to the custom attribute, then only the data that matches will get returned to the users. Okay, so we are at 2 o'clock, which is our time limit. If we didn't get to your question, then we will make sure that we get we have all the list of questions available, and we'll answer them in individual emails. So I'd like to, if you're interested in Dundas BI or anything else you saw, once again, we have these questions. We'll get back to you. If you want some more information, you can always visit our site, dundas.com, or get in touch with someone from Dundas to see like a product demo or a walkthrough. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.